Tell me a little bit about yourself, like where you were born, siblings, where you grew up, that type of thing.
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in Southern Oregon, little town called Rogue River. There was like less than 2,000 people there. And, just growing up in the 80s, it's just a different world back then. I have a brother and a sister. I'm the youngest, and just lived there top of a mountain with my family, my mom and my dad, my brother and sister. So it's just a different world than the kids grow up in today. We just didn't have all the distractions, the technology, everything. It's you can't even compare. It's just so different. And I was kind of raised in the way of don't sit in front of the TV, get outside, and no matter what the weather was, go out and get dirty, have fun, just that type of thing. So there was just a lot of that. So I think my sense of adventure was just kind of, that seed was planted early on.
That's cool. You know what? And you're right. I think I know at least my kids even nowadays just trying to encourage them to get out. Kids just don't play like we did when we were growing up. I mean, we were, what was it? Just be home before dark.
Right.
That was the thing. So you grew up kind of I mean, you were among the mountains and out and just always exploring. There was always this, from a very early age, this deep desire of adventure, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And like my grandparents lived across the creek from us, and between us was a, pretty big creek where I created a rope swing, and I would swing across the creek to get to their house. And a lot of times didn't make it, end up just soaking wet in the winter, just, but it was fun, just always out and about in the mountains. Like my brother and sister, we'd be out together, and yeah, like you said, be home before dark. My dad would go outside, we'd hear a whistle, like a referee whistle. We'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, dad's calling. You might be like, half a mile up the mountain or something, just building forts and everything. So we'd come running home and get dinner, and that was just life back then.
So tell me about your relationship as far as your father's concerned. What was that like, and how has that influenced you in your life today?
Yeah, I mean, there's goods with bads. So my dad, he lost his dad when he was 5 years old. So he didn't really grow up with a dad, and the men that influenced him weren't always good. Different levels of abuse. And then he went into, he's a jet mechanic in the Navy in Vietnam, and he really looked at his superior folks in the military, as those father figures. And then his own captain ended up getting shot down and never came back. So he just had loss after loss, and those are learned behaviors. So as a father, he had a lot of those. So growing up, I was on the receiving end of a lot of that. So a lot of good, and there's plenty of bad, but I guess that's life.
Yeah, and what's important though is that you understand and realize that you see that those places in his life, the way he grew up, and I say that, and this has come up many times in these interviews, is for me to understand and forgive my dad committing suicide. It really took God showing me a lot about who he really was and the incredibly rough life that he grew up in.
Mhm.
And it came to a point where, it was like I had to understand that my dad couldn't give what he didn't have. Right. And so there was this incredible compassion and forgiveness that God showed me for my father. So the idea that the basic, um, realization that you have in that, man, that's huge, because a lot of guys don't ever get that, and they're just always angry and upset at their dad.
Yeah, yeah, and that's tragic in itself, because there's so much life to live, and especially as we become husbands and parents, like that cycle will just continue. If we don't realize that. Fortunately, my wife is a Christian counselor, so she keeps my head on straight too. I mean, we walk this out together. We've on both sides, parents. There's things we had to deal with, and you look at how you could map your life out, and it could be pretty miserable if you just held on to a lot of these things that created that anger. And I think even meeting her back when I was in the Navy, um, she brought it out in me. I didn't even realize, I was carrying a lot of that myself. And, just working together, finding a small church there, where we, lived in San Diego, and just, once a week, just kind of walking it out together. And then eventually really, start walking our lives out. She has been a lot longer than I have, but, once I created that relationship with Jesus and, was saved, and, not everything's beautiful all the time. It's not part of it, because it's real life and we have lots of distractions. But I mean, my life was definitely changed, based on that.
Dude, I've always wanted to ask this kind of question to somebody that was married to a counselor. Do you feel like she's always psychoanalyzing you?
No,
I,
definitely not. That's a
no.
fair question. But no.
If my wife was a counselor, and I know a lot of counselors, I'm always curious. It's like, okay, what am I saying? Like, is she going to take this? And, anyway,
No,
it's,
she's good like that.
it's
But no,
got to
there's
be
times
interesting.
when, honestly, sometimes I need that though. We all do. So it's easy to label her, to map her out, like, oh, you're just psychoanalyzing me. Well, thank you for psychoanalyzing. I needed that right now. And she doesn't overstep. She's awesome.
So now tell me this real quick. Was she a big part in you becoming a believer? Was she a big influence, or were you a believer beforehand, or how'd that look?
No, so I grew up Lutheran, and I think in my early days, like my mom, she was Lutheran, and we went to church more often. And it wasn't till maybe middle schoolish, high school, it started becoming holidays. Hit Easter and Christmas, but really not involved in the church. And there was alcoholism and other stuff going on in the house that was now taking the place of our walk. But yeah, going in the Navy, I met some good friends that I served with who were Christians. So it's all part of this interesting journey. But yeah, meeting my wife Joanna, and she being a Baptist, she grew up Southern Baptist, and then the two of us just finding a Southern Baptist church, which I'd never been to, so it was a little different, but it's pretty conservative, being in San Diego. And then just we always had that anchor point. In a relationship, if you're focused on yourself, you're focused even on one another, you're losing sight of God. But when you put God as the core and you're both focused on that common goal of everlasting life, then you're going to march together, and things are going to just kind of work out amazingly, right? Work out when you're actually focused on God and Jesus, and instead of each other being selfish and whatnot. So she's definitely pivotal in this whole process. But I'd say that, I had a real, minor religious background in the back, because I mean, compared to where I'm at now in my miracle and Everest, which we'll get to and everything, it's this amazing process that I'm fortunate to be a part of.
Dude, so let's jump in, man. Tell me the story of Mount Everest and how that played out in your life.
Yeah. So again, I've always been adventurous, been into like extreme things. I was a rescue swimmer in the Navy, so I jumped out of helicopters. That was my day job. Got out, went to grad school, got my master's, MBA, and there was definitely a component missing in my life. So I, living in Washington, just out of Seattle, there's some mountains around here, started climbing, and then wanted to take it to the next level. Decided to climb the highest peaks on the 7 continents. So Everest being one of those. So in 2011, went over, climbed as an independent party, so not a big group. So I was pretty much alone, and had some Sherpa support. But, really had a unique experience up there. So it's a 2-month expedition, a lot of time away from the family. I have 2 kids, 13 and almost 16 years old now. This was back in 2011, so they were certainly young. But was there climbing, ended up soloing the summit. I'm one of like 2 people to have ever like had the summit to themselves. But because of a goggle malfunction the day prior, pretty much from the summit heading down to high camp, which is, over a mile, and at 29,035 feet, so up in the death zone, I went completely blind. So once the sun came up, banked off the ice, fried my cornea, and I was completely snowblind. And at the top of the summit, I'm completely alone. I mean, there's sections where it is a 2-mile drop on each side of you. It is, take a wrong step and it's game over. Fortunately, there's fixed lines, there's ropes that I'm attached to. So it's, still hand over hand, but had to make my way down. And just the entire journey, just couldn't see anything. I'd been climbing for over 30 hours since the day prior to that point. Just felt this presence around me, just this calming presence. And, never overthought it, just kind of like there was someone there. Just kept moving. Took a major fall down the south summit. Fortunately, the rope shock loaded and saved my life, or else we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But once I got to about the halfway point down to high camp, I ran out of oxygen and my mask started collapsing around my face. And at that moment, I just surrendered, just said, God, I can't do this alone. Please help me. Just very simple. And immediately just felt this overwhelming, I don't know, energy, just like someone reached down, picked me up and gave me life. And I fumbled around for another oxygen bottle that I had in my pack that had previously failed, put the regulator on, and I got a positive flow. And took those deep breaths, and without overthinking it, just started moving down the mountain, just stumbling down, eventually made it to high camp where Pasang, my climbing Sherpa friend, was there. He actually walked the last quarter mile and like hugged me, and I just never saw him coming. And we got back to high camp and, still had to get down, but, I was alive, and just unexplained. Well, I mean, as a Christian and cause and effect, I mean, I felt that presence. I prayed and immediately just had that moment. What's crazy is in that exact moment around the world, I had other people praying for me. So like my wife, for one, she was, middle of the night, just woke up, my best friend saying like, Brian's in trouble, like just prayed for me. It's pretty powerful.
Dude, that is awesome. What a story. How did that shape your life in your faith?
So yeah, I mean, I was Christian going into this, so it wasn't life-changing from that perspective. It solidified where I was at. I've never given credit. I won't say I've never had. I've just never given credit to such a tangible act of faith, the power of Jesus. And now I can say I have. Like, I'm just so blessed to, now years later, I can look back, or I'll have a bad day or something, someone cuts me off while driving. Like I have this point of reference that is just solid, that if I have any thoughts going any different direction, just go back to that moment. Like that it pushed every, question of whether it's real or not out.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it really answers that question of the realness of who God really is, right? I mean, you talk about him showing up and showing off, as people like to say, right? He showed up, and in a moment of your life where it was literally life or death. And I mean, I look at hear that story, the amazing story, and go, wow, it's like major events now that happen in your life. Like, no big deal. I was up on Mount Everest, and so putting it in perspective, right?
Sure.
So you wrote a book.
Yep.
What's the name of the book?
So it's Blind Descent. So yeah, I got back, and yeah, the media was around, like lots of press, the news and reenactments on the 700 Club. Reached out to Working Title Media. So I had a friend in a radio station who made a connection.
Wait, is that Bill Reeves?
Bill Reeves, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Bill, great guy.
Yeah, he's awesome. So went out and stayed at Scott Brickle's house. So Mercy Me's manager, he's pretty big in the space, and he actually connected me with Bill Reeves. We had we had breakfast, and yeah, and then they went to Tyndale House, and that's where the book is published. So yeah, it's been a interesting path, and just to have that recognition of this event. Definitely not something I expected. I was going to climb a mountain, and next thing, and I think I was more private in my faith as well. Not like, not going to tell you, but I'm not on stage. And then since now I'm public speaker, speaking in front of Microsoft and Cisco and like these major companies, and having reenactments filmed, and it's overwhelming because you know anything we ever do in life, we realize we're just human. So it's very humbling. It's like, I'm just me. I'm just a normal person. But to have this experience, and then to have it impact so many people, it really is overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine the humility in what you've seen and how God's used the story in ways that you probably never imagined, right?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, across the world.
And I guess too, did the story and what you've lived out over the last few years, but specifically to the event on Everest, I can see where it makes you understand and realize that you are a much stronger person than you ever thought you were. You know what I mean? It's that real true test of what a man is. And it's like, we always wonder, do I have what it takes? You know, can I really accomplish this? Did any of that really come to play as you were dealing with everything?
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe even a reverse effect. Like, I've climbed a lot of mountains, I've done a lot of things. I think I've proven myself out to where I don't need to tell people about it. This is an area in my life, this experience is when I could not do it on my own. So I'd say it was actually the reverse. I tried so hard to survive that mountain. And if it wasn't for a miracle, I could not have done it.
Wow. That's a great lesson in itself. The whole you are not alone, right? The idea of just knowing that God's always with us.
Yeah, I think is one of these circumstances where God is just cruising along with me. He's like, "You got this, tough guy. Like, I can do this. I can do this. Take a major fall. Let's see how you do without oxygen." Not that he's testing me, but his hand was there the whole time. Reach out, take it.
That's funny because I think in those times of, yeah, I get a little confident, a little cocky where I'm kind of doing my own thing. Maybe I don't have a quiet time, or maybe I'm not reading the Bible as much as I should, need to be, and all that. And it's like he has this way of kind of hitting me upside the head to remind
Yeah.
me, hey, bro, I'm still here. I'm the reason you're here.
Yep.
Right?
It's
That's
awesome.
funny. Um, So give me what's been the coolest experience in all of this and what God's done as a result of the book and your story? What's been one of the coolest experiences for you?
Yeah, I don't know if there's like one. It's just this collectiveness, and when I get to go out and talk to companies, and it might be the person that judge a book by a cover. Like, I'm probably not going to reach these people, or and they come up and talk to me afterward and just thank me so much for sharing my faith, and it's reaching out to me after the fact, or just the ability. I've never been, and hopefully never will be, but in a situation in large companies where they've told me not to share my faith. And it has just been that platform. And there's been certain companies where it's like, okay, I'm never going to get invited back here if I go this direction. But guess what? You can research me online. You know what you're getting. And I can't tell my story and exclude that piece because it doesn't exist.
Dude, I love that, brother. And here, what's interesting is in what you're saying in the story. When I first started out doing the Father Effect, we did the movie, and then we got a publishing deal, and all of that was coming together. I kept having these people say, "Man, your story goes outside the wall of the churches, et cetera, et cetera." And I was like, you know what? I can tell my story, but I can't tell it without God in it.
Right.
And so take it or leave it. You know what I mean? It was one of those things where, and I don't mean that to sound so
Oh, no,
so
I get
brash, but it's
it.
like, bro, God is he's the key to my story. And if I'm not sharing it with him included, then why share it, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Man, I love it. So let's talk about fatherhood,
Okay.
and being a husband. What? Hold on a second. I got my dadgum dog barking like crazy. Can you hear that in the background?
Barely. Yeah, it's not really coming through.
Oh, okay. I guess my wife's in there. She may have stopped him. I have to edit that little piece out.
I keep it.
Yeah. Uh, so, on from a fathering perspective, what do you think has been your biggest struggle as a dad, and how did you overcome it?
I think early on, it was the biggest struggle would probably be just maybe lacking, maybe lacking compassion and trying to be the guy who fixes stuff. I think the big lesson, again, married to a counselor, aligning our beliefs and what we're doing with the kids, so that there's that consistency. So kids aren't playing off one or the other. They know they go to mom, they go to dad. It's going to be the same. But it's really just getting down to their level and listening, learning, understanding, just having that compassion. Because the last thing a kid needs is, they're crying for some reason. I have a teenage daughter, is for me to come in and say, I know everything and I know what's in your head and this is what you need to do. Boom, done. Drop the mic, walk out. Worst dad ever, right? But if you can get down and just sit there and even cry with them and pray with them and just know that they're being heard. I mean, that's all you really need. Like, don't overcomplicate it. And so I'd say I say that now, but I'd say that doesn't come naturally for me. So that was probably an early struggle. And even now, something happens, I may be busy and I know how to fix this. I got it. So I have to like stop and, sometimes fail and be okay with that, but learn from it and let them know that, sorry, dad failed.
The patience piece, I think for me, even to this day, I've got a 20-year-old, an 18, and a 13-year-old. And the patience piece, I have to just consistently remind myself, because patience hasn't always been a strong suit for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's trying to understand our kids and being patient with them when they're struggling in certain areas. Because, like you said, as dads, the other thing too is we want to come in and fix it, just make it all right.
Right.
Right. um, but we can't. It's like you got to let them fail, and there's all these other things that go into it. So, um, what what's one of the more valuable lessons you've learned about being a husband?
um, well, I'd say that we are equal. We're not, I'm not right, but she's not right either, but there's sometimes where she needs to be right. But I think patience is another big piece of it, because we're totally, like, my wife and I, if you put us on a spreadsheet, we would be 100% opposite. I don't know if there's one area where we would be the same. It's insane. So on paper, we don't belong. In fact, when we were dating, we saw a counselor because all we did was argue. And the counselor said, just stand up, turn opposite ways, and run. Like, this is a disaster. And I'm pretty goal driven. I'm like, oh really? you know like, challenge accepted. So we've really worked together, but it's taken so much work up front. And we dated for 6 years before we got married, so we had a lot of growing up to do. And I'm so fortunate, we both are very fortunate that we did that time. We invested in each other, and we always had our small little church in San Diego that we went to, that we were the youngest couple there. Everyone else was 30, 40 years older than us. Even the pastor at one point is like, why do you guys come here? And I'm like, I don't know, we like it. Like, we feel safe, it's good. We're not distracted with all the other stuff. But I think just having that core relationship and walking it out, with Jesus, and then each other aligning that strategy, it just, it works. And the couples that pray together stay together.
Now, where are you out of now? Are you still in San Diego?
No, we're up in just out of Seattle, so like 25 miles east. It's called Snoqualmie. So we go to Church on the Ridge, which we've been going for quite a while, over a decade.
And you said you have two kids?
Yep, boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl, teenage girl, and then is the boy younger?
Yeah, he's 13 and she turns 16 next month.
What's I'll ask this question because this is always an interesting one that has one of like I've got three girls, my brother has three boys, and we compare notes and talk all the time. But what's the biggest challenge in fathering a girl versus a boy?
Um, yeah, so fortunately, because she's older, and she's about to turn 16, it's like everyone warns us, we're heading down that path, but they've been brought up in the church and she's just a strong, both Christian and just, she has her small group of friends. And, um, the challenges have been, fortunately, not not major, but it's emotions and everything, those things that I don't have the female emotions. So it's understanding that from that perspective. um, but they're unique in a lot of ways, and different in some ways as well. They both play soccer. They love, their favorite thing each year is to go winter mountaineering, just the three of us. Like we'll go up to like Mount Rainier and dig in a snow cave, or put up a tent, and they love it. It's freezing and they come back and mom's like, was it horrible? Like, it was freezing, we loved it. It's like the best thing ever, just making these memories. So,
Dude, and there doesn't get any better than that. When you can do those type of things with those kids, wow, that's stuff they'll remember for the rest of their life, and even repeat maybe in their
mhm.
kids' lives. Now you said so. Have you climbed what did you say? The seven?
The highest peaks on the 7 continents.
Yes. So you've done that.
Yeah, so I've climbed them all, summited 6. I've actually been up to Denali up in Alaska 3 times, 3 expeditions, snowboarded it once. I still have not stood on top. So I guess officially I haven't climbed them all, but I was within 1,000 feet the first time up there. And that's one thing in my life. I'm always driven and want to complete my projects, everything else. So that's been a tough one. Like, can I live my life and never stand on top of that mountain? And I think I can. Like, over time, it's like that's a lot of time away from the family. There's a lot of mountains, there's a lot of adventures in this world, and it's a mountain. So,
You know what? And it's interesting you say that because you've obviously become more mature in your faith and you've gotten older and wiser too. And it's like, as a young man, I think we all kind of buy into, you know, all that. It was all about success, money, power,
mhm,
all of that early on. And then I realized, whoa, hold on a second. This isn't what life's really all about, right? there's there's something much bigger than this. But for you, I mean, because that is probably literally, or at least in years before, that would have been a battle for you, right? Which when it's not.
mhm. Yeah, that would have been tough. I would have probably hit it every year until I got it. So, yeah, so that's good. That's a positive thing, as long as I can release it, be okay with it. And I'm I get asked to go climb it every year, lead groups up, like SEAL Team 6 will reach out to have me, just talk them through, just what they're going to experience, because they'll go up and do some ops up there and things. So it's neat to be that resource, but it doesn't mean that I need to go and lead them or lead others.
So tell me, eh, going through all this, what was it that motivated you? Like the climbing the seven peaks on the seven continents. What's the motivation? What makes a man do that?
I never said I was smart.
Yeah. Well, I'm not either, but
I think it's just a part of how we're wired. God wired us all differently, and sometimes we just have to realize who we are, who we're not. Very goal driven, very adventurous, love the outdoors. I don't love working out inside and that type of thing. So if I'm going to climb, why not climb the highest peaks on the 7 continents? It's an interesting thing. And what's awesome is I get to travel to all those areas. I got to beg for money from sponsors and stuff, but get to travel, have those experiences. And I always visited orphanages prior. So I would do like a toy drive and go and find an orphanage in these different locations, and just, go and show them that these kids that maybe the world has in their minds let them down, and just tell them, there's a God out there that loves them, and and been able to bring my family to a lot of these places as well, and actually have them, go to these orphanages. And they actually both climbed, actually all my whole family climbed the highest peak in Australia together. So yeah, so it's a life adventure, but it's not just necessarily selfish Brian's life is adventure. I try to involve the family, but there's plenty of selfishness involved too.
Well, but even what you're able in an event like that, I can only imagine what you're able to teach your kids, you know,
Yeah,
going back to what, I mean, teaching them that they're a lot stronger than they ever thought they were, or, there's so much more for them to be able to dig down and get within themselves that they may have never had the opportunity or occasion to do before, right?
right. Yeah, and even in the mountaineering that we do here in the Cascade Range, we'll go up and do like a multi-day, and they're always going to reach that point where it's easier to turn back and head back down. But pushing them to a certain extent, not to where I'm got the whip out or anything. Like I'm real, and we'll have conversations. And if we don't reach our summit, that's okay. We've done that plenty. Brought my son Jordan when he was super young up like Mount Adams, a 12,000-foot peak, Mount Whitney, all these pretty major peaks. And there's been times where he's not feeling good, or I'm not feeling good, and I can have that vulnerable moment, be like, you know what, Dad's stomach hurt. We got to this altitude too quickly, and just shows that I'm real, and it's okay for him to be real as well.
Wow, brother, that I love that lesson for so many of us, I think, as dads. And that's a huge lesson for me that I've learned in this journey, is really getting that it's okay to be real and vulnerable and, share our real emotions and cry and all the stuff that men truly need to understand, that it's okay to do, because there's this incredible myth out there that we can't, that you got to man up, suck it up, you got to be it, you men, real men don't cry, all that other BS, right? It's like,
Right.
come on, man. um, so you being able to exemplify that to your son, dude, that is so huge. And such a great lesson, I think, for many of us to be reminded of. um, as we wrap up, tell me, if you're sitting in front of a new dad for the first time, and he says, man, give me one piece of advice that's going to be changing my life, what would you tell him?
Changing his life. Yeah, yeah, it's hard to just do one, right, as a somewhat seasoned
You can
dad.
give me more than one, but just
I think there's two areas, and one's probably not, maybe it's not what you would expect, but I think we really need to avoid the devices. I think we're raising kids in a time when now we're in this iGen where they've never not had the internet, not had devices. And I think it's too easy for parents to use that as a babysitter. And we have such a small window with our children before they're off and doing their own thing. And I would say really avoid giving your child a device until they're at least a teenager. Let them be different. All their friends have devices. I get it. Be the kids in the family at a restaurant where you're all talking, where you're having conversations, you're at the same level, you totally understand what's going on in their life, not what's on Snapchat, or because the other piece of that is it's dangerous. That is the open internet to violence, porn, everything else. And once kids see that stuff, they can never unsee it. So I would say be man enough to have the courage to not be the norm. Don't give them the device, and don't be on your device when have that time. There's plenty of time when kids are at school, everything else. You can wedge it all in there. And I guess, I get it. There's times when you have to, but don't make it the norm, because if you're doing that, what do you think they're going to want to do? And they're feeling neglected at that time too. They're not feeling heard. So might be kind of a different direction of advice, but I think it's so important, and we all have to do our small part.
brother, I love it. I'll tell you, I was just thinking about this the other day. When my girls were younger, my two older ones were younger, the whole idea of normal, normalcy with what they saw in their friends and everything else. And I
Mhm.
remember I started doing this. I didn't start doing it intentionally at the beginning, but I started realizing kind of what it was doing. And it was like, hey, normal's boring. Weird is where it's at. And I would tell my kids, weird is fun. Because I didn't want them to fall in line with thinking because everybody else is doing it, it's okay to
Mhm.
do it. So I
Yeah.
wanted them to start thinking, man, I'm weird. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to have the, I want to instill in my girls the capability, the desire to be different than everybody else, right? Be different, not of this world, right? Be
Mhm.
different than everything else in this world. So, dude, I think it's a great point. And it's something all of us can be, I think, always doing it a little more and working a little harder at because,
Well, the world
uh,
is making sure that we're not. So you really have to go against the world in that one.
yeah, absolutely, dude. Tell guys, I know there's going to be a lot of guys that want to connect with you. How can they reach out to you through social media?
Yeah. So I'm on every flavor of social media after we're talking about putting our devices down. But my handle is Brian C. Dickinson. And then my website is briandickinson.net. So, or just Google me, I'm out there.
And the book they can get Amazon, Barnes and Noble, that type of thing, and on your website, obviously.
Yep. Yeah, it's linked all over. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
100%.
Dude, I know you're busy, man. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do this today, dude. I want to stay connected with you and continue to hear what God's doing in your life as a result of your story and all that you're doing. It's so exciting, brother.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
We'll definitely reconnect at some point, man. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you.